Going to talk about microblading and powder brows. My name is Kristen Strothmann-Peters. I'm an esthetician at enrolling. I've been an esthetician since I was 19, and that is 23 years later. I don't think the math is right on that because I'm 39. But anyway, I've been an esthetician kind of my whole adult career, and I love it. I love everything that aesthetics has been able to do for me. Be a nurturer, be a good listener, really helping people, the guests, feel good about themselves and giving them little sort of morsels and treatments along the way of things that they can do to feel better about their appearance. 4 years ago, I took the journey to kind of right as the industry was starting and as it became popular in Milwaukee to get trained on microblading. And that began the journey of taking lots of airplane trips to go and get the best education wherever it was available. Chicago, LA, San Diego, Dallas, probably some other places too. And hundreds of hours have been spent at my kitchen table working on mannequins, hundreds of guests that have been willing to trust me to allow me to give them beautiful brows. And it's definitely something that I've put a lot of time into. And I think, for the esthetician that feels like they either really have that eye for detail, that great eye for makeup, the eye for symmetry, and just really the wherewithal to take something and to really learn it. I would say microblading is something that might be right for you. But it's also definitely an advanced practice. So this is something I wouldn't say you want to dip your toe into necessarily right out of the gate. I think knowing how to have steady hands, knowing how to have done hundreds of brow waxes, and really also being able to listen to your consumer and know what they want. Because as we know, and you've probably seen, there's lots of microblading out there, and who does it and who you trust is really what it's all about. So that's a little bit about microblading. What we're going to talk a lot about today is there's two different techniques. There is both microblading and then there is machine powder brows or ombre brows. Microblading is sort of the first thing people have heard. I would say powder brows are definitely maybe the long-term thing that you're going to hear a little bit about. And so we're going to show pictures a little bit later of what hair strokes are, which is microblading. We're going to also then talk and show you some pictures of powder brows, which is, basically a pixelated, looks like you have makeup on sort of look. So both of the looks are beautiful, wearable, can be customized to, the consumer, and both also are, utilized for, different demographics of skin types. So not everybody, probably say, 20% of your client base is suited for microblading, whereas 100% of your client base is suited to have powder brows. And so we can talk a little bit about that. We have our lovely model here today, and her name's Petra. What we're going to do, this is going to be a simulation, so we're not actually going to microblade her brows, but we are going to show how we do our consultation, how we do our brow mapping, all of that. Then we're going to kind of walk you through the process. So without further ado, Petra and I talked a little bit before we got started, and I know she wants a natural brow. She's got blonde hair. I personally love a slightly darker brow, not too dark, but maybe a dark blonde, medium brown on somebody with blonde hair. I think it kind of makes them stand out a little bit. On the other hand, somebody that has black hair, I'm going to have to soften the look with not making, them have super, super dark brows. It might be a little bit softer and a little bit more of a dark brown. So as we get started, I'm going to put a little ruler on Petra's eyebrows, and this is going to help make our measurements all that more accurate. I certainly use my eye as well as math. And so this is kind of one of those treatments where you're using sort of both sides of your brain. You definitely need to use your creativity, but without some brass tacks of knowing where your measurements are, the treatment's very messy and you're going to get sort of lost. So, um, with that said, I put the ruler in the middle of her brows. That's what I sort of call zero. I won't even keep this on when we do the treatment, but this is going to give me my markings. And so I'm going to just kind of start. I took a piece of thread and I put some black eyeliner on it. And we're going to just start by sort of making our markings. And so I'm going to always make sure that her face is even, as we can kind of just see here. Maybe this brow comes down just a little bit more and this one a little bit up. So the whole goal is symmetry. And certainly, we'll get as best as we can. And her opening her eyes, her sort of making some movements, that'll all make it a little bit more understandable where her brows lie. So there's definitely that whole piece in microblading of your brow muscles and understanding sort of how all of that works. And then there's just sort of the eye of what we feel as an artist is going to look best for her. So definitely on Petra, not an overwhelming eyebrow, nothing too dark. We're just going to give her the ability so that she doesn't have to fill in her brows every day. And that, for, I would say, a lot of people is what they're looking for. There's definitely, the guests that come to me that want a real high concept brow. They want it very, very, angled and perfect. That's cool too. Understanding who my audience is a huge part of what I'm walking into. And the only way I really know that is by talking to them and asking them questions. So just getting a few measurements here. These are all, I've gone through many tutorials of how to get your measurements. Ultimately, you sort of do what comes, what works for you. But I definitely utilize my rulers in this so that I know that I'm starting from the most accurate perspective. So this probably, in it all, is, maybe the first 10-15 minutes of my brow appointment with my guest. And this is the time that if Petra kind of is telling me any concerns, maybe it's about color or maybe thickness, this is where I'm really putting my feelers out to listen to her, because I have this chance to give her what she wants. It's just really important that I don't, do what I think I should do. It's definitely a mix of both. And again, for someone that's a little bit younger, and has a beautiful brow, we're just going to kind of go with something natural. Certainly, in older women where they may not have the landmarks of brows as good as Petra has to start out with, then we're going to utilize our tools of knowing, where to bring the brow in. Most people will tell you, most older clients will tell you that they just want their brows to look like they did at, let's say, when they were 25. And so, not giving them suddenly a super thick eyebrow, that's all what my job is. It's about making it appropriate. So we've got our measurements. We're kind of filling in the brow just so we know where we're going to want to work. This is the time for me as well that I may be seeing some of these areas up close a little bit better to know maybe, where she's going to need more coverage. Certainly looking at her skin type right now, thinking about what techniques I'm going to want, looking at the color of her brows.
Kristen, can you show us a little bit about what's on your tray here?
Absolutely. So as we sort of begin, these are my tools of what we're going to be using to kind of help us achieve a better shape. I have a little trimmer, and what's wonderful about this is when we take all of that peach fuzz off, for me working, it's going to be a very clear sort of deciphering of where we are trying to stay in our borders. So this will help us clean up. I've also got tweezers, scissors, certainly to use, to trim her brows is very important. What we don't want to do is do a full brow wax before she comes in. that all should have sort of been maybe done if she had a consultation with me. We definitely want our brows to have a nice shape going into today, but this is not the time with the amount of sort of irritation that this service can sort of kick up, that we don't want to do a full-on brow wax. We want to kind of calm the hair follicles before we get started with this process.
Can you tell us again what the two types of microblading are?
Oh, absolutely. So it's really just microblading, which is also known as hair strokes. And then the second is called powder brows or ombre brows, machine brows. And that really is the original form of permanent makeup. It's just we, in the last several years, have refined the technique, that it's not this dense, super dark eyebrow that maybe your Aunt Rita, let's call her, had that over time looked green or gray or blue. Those inks that were used way back when, those were permanent, those were tattoo pigments. What's unique about powder brows, or semi-permanent makeup as we call ourselves permanent makeup artists, but it really all is semi-permanent, is these pigments are meant to come out of the skin at a certain point. They're still implanted into the skin like a tattoo. It's still sort of that theory, but the inks have a different makeup of molecule and have a little bit more dilution to it, that they're meant to age. And as they age, they don't get green, they don't get, gray. They just beautifully migrate and sort of lighten up in the skin. So definitely, anybody that had it done in the past, that was sort of the pioneers of it, but our technique is meant to really be beautiful. In an education that I had too, we discussed that as much as we want microblading and powder brows to last forever, good, beautiful, semi-permanent makeup is meant to last a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Anything that we do to make it last that much longer is going to come at the cost of somebody's skin. So what we would be doing in those cases, unfortunately, is creating, scar tissue to the skin. So
is there anyone who cannot have microblading done?
So really, the absolute no is anybody that is prone to have keloid scarring. So a keloid is basically a scar that just kind of knows no bounds and reproduces a ton of extra scar tissue and collagen. And certainly from the mild invasiveness that we do with this, that would cause that kind of injury. Most of the time, anything that anybody comes to me with, we can sort of still work with it. Anybody that's maybe a diabetic has slower healing times, and certainly anybody that is undergoing chemotherapy or does not have a healthy immune system is somebody that cannot have microblading, at least at this time.
And then, what you're doing right now, is this something that you would do when someone's laying down or sitting up like this?
I like to do both. When you have somebody sitting up, you have the ability to see how their muscles are looking. And we certainly want to get the full understanding of what their muscles are going to do. Otherwise, we could let their muscles relax, have them laying down, do this beautiful markup, have them sit up, and just the natural tendency of their muscle movement is going to not reflect the balance that we're looking. So microblading, powder brows, definitely about achieving some symmetry. And we will notice that everybody just has a little bit of mild asymmetry, and that's what we're here to sort of correct. So.
And what about as far as who can do the service? Do you have to be an esthetician too?
You do not have to be an esthetician. At least in the state of Wisconsin, obviously everybody in various parts of the country have different laws, but you do need to have a tattoo license. And so in the state of Wisconsin, you get a tattoo license that does not require really any apprenticeship either. In other states, it certainly does, but in the state of Wisconsin, it's mostly important that your insurance will cover you if you have gone to proper training. So it's not something that you necessarily go to a tattoo shop and have them apprentice you, which is how the tattoo industry trains people, but that you go to a quality, source of education to get your, understanding. And then to anybody that is interested in offering this, you definitely do not want to touch people until you know that, you're not taking a risk, that you're not going to give them something that, they're going to have removed. So, models are real people too, and so you practice on latex, and you can buy that off of Amazon, and I still practice on latex. So my goal is to try to practice about an hour a day. And in the last 4 years, it's amazing how my fine motor movements have really come together by really understanding how to tighten up my hand movements. So getting back to our model, Petra, we've kind of filled in her brows as to what we think they're going to look like. Certainly, I think she's going to need, just for the sake of our audience seeing it, a little bit of just a little bit of cleanup so that we can show exactly what we're willing to do in our work. I know any estheticians that may be looking maybe horrified with, trimming the brows, but it's really something when you're doing permanent makeup you need to do. Again, this wouldn't be the time to do a brow wax. This is really the time to save, save it all for when we start the procedure. We really want to kind of not irritate your skin.
Kristen, from your experience, about how long did it take you to get certified and how much did it cost?
I would say it's been at least $10,000. I've had a lot of different trainings. Each time you want to learn a technique, you're looking at having some additional training. So most trainers are about $3,000 every 2 days. And that is where you also get to work with a live model. And there's a lot out there. There's for any of us in the beauty industry, there's a lot of YouTube training. There's a lot of great Instagram training. So a lot of it is just sharpening your eye to how to create gorgeous brows and to just be really willing to practice on them. Okay, so almost got her shape down, and we're just going to want to make sure I can see some areas that we're going to need to sort of tweeze. Definitely we are going to need to tweeze up this brow a little bit to make it look more like this. And probably for the sake of today, I don't know if I'm going to just do all of this completely. I'll try to do my best to even out her brows.
Did you have to get your tattoo license before your class?
Generally, when you go to a class, you're sort of in their jurisdiction of their state. So you just need to get your bloodborne pathogen certification in order to work for an enrollee. And in order for an enrollee to be compliant, we needed to have our tattoo establishing license. And from an insurance perspective, we needed to make sure that before anybody insured us, they knew that I had had proper education.
Sure. And then how often does a guest have to come back or get any retouches done?
So this is a 2-step procedure. This is definitely something that you have the first treatment done, and then you come back. It's 6 weeks for your touch-up. And as an artist, at that point, I'm sort of reading the skin. I'm seeing how this took, what were the considerations in our aftercare. Did the guest not pick at the brows? Did this work for their skin type if their skin type was very oily? So their aftercare is very important, and in that we ask that you do not sweat, that you do not work out for a week. You can not shower. You basically, while the skin is healing, and it's definitely where it's a little bit more impressionable for the first week, your aftercare and cleaning the brows with what I give you to use at home, cleaning and using Aquaphor are very important. There's definitely a lecture that I give my guests that, you know, as much as you'd like to pick at your brows or as much as the skin is going to start to sort of flake, you really have to protect your investment. And I think most people are fairly willing to do that, but sometimes there's a little bit of a learning curve. So the first and the second treatment, you know, the first treatment happens, then in 6 weeks they have their second treatment, and then after that, I would say each healing time is about 7 days to 2 weeks, and then as the brows are healing, and we're creating new skin, the brows are going to look not as vibrant. They're definitely going to look, you know, not as dark as they want. Really takes the skin 4, 5, even 6 weeks to fully heal, although they may feel like their brows are healed within 2 weeks, but we know that we can't really completely estimate how successful this was until about 4 weeks. So, okay, so next in my process with Petra is giving her a mirror, having her have a chance to look at it. Is this the shape that she wants to see? And once we sort of are good on that, just going to tweeze this. And sometimes I'll take a picture. The camera will always sort of make symmetry or asymmetry that much more obvious. And so after that, we sort of decide we're committing to it, and then I'm going to mark this. And so as I mark, making very sure that I know exactly where we are.
Two, one. We're back.
We're back. You didn't miss a whole lot other than I've been marking Petra's eyebrows. She's going to take a look at them, and sometimes I explain to them what they should be looking at, because sometimes they're seeing a brow that to them might look, you know, I think they have to just understand that I'm looking at what's within and not making the brow go too far beyond. And then this is an opportunity where she'll be able to look at it. And so this is what we're sort of looking at. So we're going to have to bring this brow up just a little bit, which I did a little bit by tweezing. And we're going to bring this brow down a little bit. So at home, you'll have to just be good about tweezing this area, or when you get your brows waxed, so that that sort of bridges the gap of the symmetry. How does this shape look to you? Is this
good?
Yeah. And what about color? Do you feel like this color's too dark, or is it about the right color?
Good.
Yeah, I definitely think now we'll kind of, at this point when we sort of call it that this is the shape that we're working off, we're going to numb her brows. The numbing stays on for about 15 minutes. Definitely takes the edge off. We have 2 ways we can numb. One's this, and then we have secondary numbing, which are little drops that work instantly. And so most of the time people are pretty comfortable. A lot of times people fall asleep, which is fantastic. There's, you know, it's a great thing. So we're numbing her, and we'll leave this on for about 15 minutes. This 15 minutes now for me is critical, because I've got to sort of just take everything into consideration that we talked about, pick colors, and then prep my procedural station. This is absolutely the highest level of sanitation and sterilization. So everything we use is either disposable or gets cleaned with a hospital grade disinfectant afterwards. So as we sort of carry you over a little bit into how I would prep, I have 2 pairs of gloves. This realistically is about, I usually have about 5 pairs of gloves because as I'm working around the bed, as I'm wiping with water, there's always the possibility that I just have to, get up and readjust. And so absolutely, you're just going to get used to changing your clothes a lot. And they also get really messy. So we're going to put our gloves on, and she's numbing. Maybe she's going to use the bathroom, maybe have a little bit of water. And, the service itself takes about 2 hours minimum, sometimes a little bit longer. I'm going to kind of walk you through some of my ideas for color. So with microblading, you can go darker, but you can't go lighter. So picking a color that is not too dark is absolutely important. It's always good to sort of do like a half step. So when I use these, I'll swab them onto her, any area of her skin. And then as it dries, I can sort of look for undertones. Color theory is really important and something that I have also invested in. There's some great webinars about how color theory and warming or cooling comes into play, because their undertones, their redness, their freckles, their tan, all of that really speaks a lot to what their predisposition is in terms of how the overall color will heal. So we're going to take, just a couple colors here. A lot of times these lighter colors look a little orangey. That's okay. Once they go into the skin, they look really, really beautiful. So I try for people not to worry about how beautiful that color looks. I know that there's several different options we can use to get to our target color, and always be on the safe side with not going too dark. So
what else can you get tattooed on your face, and can you tattoo lips to make them look fuller?
You absolutely can. So you can tattoo your eyeliner, and there's beautiful artists out there that are doing a very smoky, eyeshadowy liner. It's very beautifully sort of pixelated and soft. And then you can also absolutely tattoo lips. So all of those are additional educations. And if you're looking at learning all 3 of those, you're probably looking at taking a 5 to 7 day course. For me, I'm all about brows, probably not interested in learning eyeliner or lips at this time. But they're a big industry. And any one of your guests that's going to trust you to do your brows, is a great audience that's going to also maybe want to, have their lips done. Who wouldn't want to wake up with, gorgeous lips? So we're going to take a look at some of the ideas we have here. I have 2 different needles that I pulled up. This one's easier to see. This is a Jen Boyd. I think she makes the best needles in the industry. They're also very affordable, about $1 a piece. This is a 14.18, and this means 14 means there's 14 pins or needles, and the 1/8 means the depth in the skin that you're going. Another option is the 16.18, and this is curved, and they all have, it's more of a feel of what you like to use. I personally love the slanted blades, and that's what I use, and that's what we'll use, when we microblade. Also knowing that we might do a powder brow today, we can always do both in the process. We can do a combo brow, some hair strokes, some powder, and that's a beautiful look. So a lot of people, it's not all or nothing. However, I would probably in a service emphasize one over the other. So today we're going to focus more on powder shading her brows, doing a few hair strokes. Next time we'll focus kind of a little bit more on the hair strokes and a little bit less on the powder shading. It's just really about, getting into the skin with the least amount of trauma. This is definitely a service that you don't know until you're working on a guest's skin type as to their sensitivity. And so certainly there is lots of lymphatic fluid that comes up, there is blood, and we're constantly kind of working to calm the skin. That's where some of our numbing drops come in. And we're also really working to do the service safely and quickly and with minimal invasion. So whether it's how I adjust the length of my needle, longer or shorter, it's how the speed that I use my needle is of my machine. Is it faster or is it slower? And it's also, what are my hand movements? Are my hand movements long or are my hand movements shorter? All of those things give us a different outcome. And certainly working with a very delicate skin type would be the hardest. But also, the one that you're going to want to not over-traumatize the skin.
What kind of ink do you use, Kristen?
So I use 2 different brands. Some of the best in the industry, I think. Tina Davies is a big player in the market. Tina Davies makes some great blades, and she has a partnership with Permablend, which has been around forever in permanent makeup colors. Her pigments are lovely. They last a little bit longer. They're a little less forgiving, so you have to be extremely accurate when you're using them. And then the other line that I use is called LI. And LI has been around probably the longest, has some phenomenal training, definitely is, an industry leader in color theory. And, within both of these, I then also belong to Facebook boards. So I have constantly, if I need to know how these colors are healing, I can go and, have numerous people weigh in on, you know, on, the products. So we have that. Very important to have a mentor in this, at least a few, and it's also very important to be willing to travel for really great quality training. So I would say that my very permanent makeup mother is a woman named Kristina Melchenenko, and she's in Dallas, and I try my best to not ever overwhelm her. However, if you know me, I like to go to people when I'm frazzled, and so she's definitely shown me a lot and kind of course corrected. It's a beautiful thing too about Facebook Live videos or taking a photo and showing some work is the feedback that you get. So there's a huge community in the permanent makeup world that is something to learn and something to have to kind of create a sense of help through it all. So
with that being said, have you ever had any experiences that didn't go as planned, and maybe what they taught you?
Well, I think I'm always learning, and oddly enough, any of the brows that I've ever felt not so secure about, I've always been able to make them beautiful in the end. And I would say about 90% of my guests that I've ever done their brows 4 years ago have come back to me for their yearly touch-ups, and that is just absolutely the best compliment that there possibly is. And my commitment to them is just that I'm always seeking education and I'm always improving. But certainly you could make the wrong call on the color. Did you put too much modifier in it, which is like, to cancel out the gray, and being that it's a 2-step process is kind of a beautiful thing because you have this opportunity to sort of adjust things. So it's not completely forgiving, but if you're light-handed, which I suggest, you have a little bit of wiggle room, and and do I ever not feel 100% about it? Like, all the time. Yeah. And I just come home and I try to be good to myself, and I try to, not to obsess. But when you're doing something that has this kind of impact, you owe it to your consumer to be really confident. And I think I also owe it to myself to not beat myself up, because, this is something that, we're all getting better from. So yeah, it'd be awesome to have, a team that I worked with that are all doing it. But the reality is that my Facebook community and my mentors and hopping on a plane, those are usually the areas where I sort of get my people. So I did a little demo here before you came in. This is what I practice on when I'm at home, and I needed the mannequin head because I needed to know the feel when I'm working at home of what it's like to rest my hand on a temple versus just doing something flat. So every time I work, whether it be in my treatment room at Enrolling when I have some downtime, I have a foam from Michael's, like craft head, that I work on. And I really try to be as close to how I work as when I'm doing the service. So I work all around the sides of my guest when I'm working with them. A lot of times I'm in front of them. A lot of times I have them sit up. I work, in front of their brows and in the back of their brows. There's many different ways that you want to be able to see it. And I think that that's helped me sort of make really careful executions when I'm laying down color and when I'm laying down, a vibrating, tattoo gun. So I would say that, so let me just show you. This is an example of powder brows. I did this like literally in like 20 minutes. Not my best work, but this kind of goes to show you a little bit about what an ombre powder brow looks like. So, a clear, nice, distinct outline. All of this depends on, the achieved goal. If they want something that's a little bit more natural, we go for a little bit more pixelation. If they want something that's really, like I call high concept, like Kardashian brows, we're going to, have the machine going really, really fast so we get really saturated pixels. So whenever I do any of this, I'll start with my own little mock-up of making the brow, and then I sort of am tracing my lines. I start with my outline, and then, I would say if you're doing about 4 sets of these a day, you're definitely practicing, and you definitely need to practice. It's not something that you just show up and do. Otherwise, you're not learning, and it's just, you don't want to learn on your guests because you will have so many different scenarios, and you just want to be, I think in anything, you want your muscles to do the work for you so that when you go and you're sitting with your guest and they have asymmetry or extreme sensitive skin, or maybe they're very nervous, you have your body and your muscles and your instincts ready to go, so that this is just kind of, in a way, playtime. It's usually, I'm kind of nervous when I'm about to work, and then the second I have my, my machine ready, my mask on, my, and I've chugged a gallon of water, and I'm sitting down and everything, that's usually when my artistry shows up, and that's when my nerves sort of go away. And I got to that point after, hundreds of doing this at home. So you don't just necessarily show up and knock it right out. So, and then just to kind of take you back to this, this is the difference between a powder brow. This is all machine shading, and this is what hair strokes look like. So certainly we could do a combination of both. In that instance, if we started with hair strokes, we would probably just weave a little color into the ends and sort of into the middle to make it look a little bit more, cohesive. So somebody that's a good candidate for hair strokes is definitely going to be your younger audience, those that have not oily skin, not a lot of sensitivity, free of hyperpigmentation, certainly not somebody with rosacea. So I guess when we think about who's the perfect category of who has perfect skin, it's kind of like that 20% of your audience. Certainly, if you really want hair strokes, and I agree that it's safe for you to have them and that they're going to heal nicely, if you have oilier skin, they're going to fade quicker. Your body just sort of metabolizes them quicker, and they're going to fuzz out. So they're not going to be super crisp. As they fade, they're going to sort of blur, and ultimately, hair stroke brows on an oily skin type is going to ultimately sort of migrate or turn to a powder brow. It's not the worst thing. It's what we did 3-4 years ago. Now we're kind of looking at somebody and assessing right away, you're probably more of a powder brow candidate. Definitely a combo brow, though, is a beautiful option of both.
If someone wanted to get this done before a wedding or a photo shoot, how far in advance should they come in for an appointment?
So if you're getting married, I would want to see you 4 months before. Maybe we could do 3 months, but you're definitely going to have to kind of come out of a total of, let's say 2.5 months of healing. So you have your first appointment at 6 weeks, you come back later, and after 6 weeks, you have your touch-up done. And after your second touch-up, it's still going to take about 4 weeks to get to your ideal, conclusion where the color is going to completely heal. So I would say 2.5 months minimum, 3 or 4 months. I wouldn't make somebody's brows darker so that they faded lighter. You want to just kind of get the color right from the get-go. But it's definitely something that you need to plan for a little bit. There's a lot of guests that I've had too that are just extremely active in the summer. They can't not exercise. They sweat. They're swimmers. Those people are better off to come and see me in the wintertime. So you have to have, it's a real give and take, So, you have to be willing to commit to not sweating, exercising, swimming, at least for that first, 2 weeks. And if you can do that, then you're a good candidate. So it's definitely something that you don't necessarily need downtime, but you're going to have a little bit of in-between time. Certainly don't need to take off work for it, but you want to give yourself a little bit of a breather. So I wouldn't do this with the hopes to, if you're looking for something a little bit less committal, maybe get your brows colored or tinted, and that's a good step for people that maybe want to take the plunge. But the guests that are coming to me because maybe they have filled their brows in for several years and they just don't think they do a good job. Maybe the shape of their brows is just not really suited for, it's not really making them look younger or, in trend. So I think the consumer that's coming to me is definitely looking to be able to put their makeup pencil down and to have brows that are just ready to go every day. And, so definitely a little bit of a time commitment, but it's a great investment.
Can men have it done?
Yeah, certainly. I've done men's brows, and I really take my time in the way that I plan at home for giving really good sort of masculine hair patterns. So for a man's not necessarily looking for brows that are going to have a whole lot of shape to them and sort of overly chiseled. Men are going to look for more, that they're a little bit more dense. And it's not necessarily about the arch, and most men's brows aren't that long. So it's, it's a fun challenge. It's definitely about making it look kind of where they're undone, but they're really there. Certainly men aren't probably going to be filling them in with makeup after. So it's my opportunity and my real goal to give them to give them the coverage that they need. Typically, I don't do a powder brow on a man, just because that maybe has a little bit more of a makeup outcome. And so hair strokes are sometimes the way to go, as long as, their skin type can, withstand that as well.
And then what about doing a facial before a microblading session?
So you would not want to have a facial the day of microblading. You wouldn't want to have a BBL. You wouldn't want to have Botox. There's certain things that we just need to let our skin sort of rest and not excite our skin and not work it up. So typically we say Botox is 2 to 4 weeks prior. Sometimes we use Botox to correct before they come in of symmetry. A lot of people, if we were looking to pull this brow up, Botox will do a beautiful job of that versus me making their brow so thick that it matches up with the other side. But certainly it's not an essential. Anybody that's looking to have Botox, I usually send them to have Botox before they come to see me versus after they come to see me. And those kinds of med spa services are definitely things you want to do a good 3 to 4 weeks after. Any other questions?
I don't see any more coming in at this time.
Okay. Well, if you want to follow me on Instagram, I would so appreciate it. I also have a couple pictures that I thought we could show real quick. So our lovely Jamie, who's helping us with our photos, is going to put up a link of the 3 pictures. And these are all images of guests after the service is over. And if you'll see those first 3 pictures, those are all powder brows. Those all are, you can look on my Instagram page, Brows by Kristen, Kristen, and you'll be able to see a ton of work. I post a lot of my work, and a lot of guests come in knowing exactly what shape that they want. So certainly I don't have like, here are my 5 styles, but people have no issue kind of finding a brow that they can sort of relate to. So hopefully that picture has gone up. Yeah?
Yeah, she's scrolling through your Instagram. So.
Okay, cool. And then she's also going to post a picture or 2 of 2 guests that I just did, just hair strokes or microblading. So those are going to kind of show you that effect and sort of the artistic nature of those hair strokes that look natural. We can achieve, however, the look of beautiful filled-in brows regardless of the technique. So if you come in for, we just do microblading or we just do powdered shading, it's not going to make, the technique doesn't matter for the consumer as much as, that what we're choosing is based on what's going to wear the longest in their skin and what's just appropriate for their skin type. And that's definitely something as an esthetician is most important to me. I know how things are going to heal, and I know that, the consumer maybe doesn't know how the process is going to go. So that's definitely where I have to sort of give them the guidance. So you'll be able to see some of those works. You don't have to, if you come in to see me, a lot of times people book a consultation first. I kind of love that because I get an opportunity to meet you, kind of feel you out. Okay. What was I saying? Oh, darn. So if you come in and you have a consultation with me, it's a great preparedness for you to understand of like a little bit about what the process is going to be like. We talk about aftercare. We take pictures. We fill in your brows. I'll shape them a little bit, and then we sort of book your appointment. I think it's great for the relationship to build that way, so that guests can leave knowing like, yes, this is who I feel comfortable with. They definitely feel like when they meet me and see my work and we talk about it and we sort of get their fears out of the way, it gets them a little bit more excited for it. You don't need to know what you want that day, in terms of what technique. That's really all, sort of what I know. So I think, just book your appointment and, just be open to my artistry and suggestions, but just also know that it's so much about, making you feel really good about yourself. And I think, when we look into the little tips and tricks as women in the beauty world that we can do that sort of give us the best outcome, I think microblading is really one of them. It's very subtle, it's very natural, and it's really going to be youthful for you. It's really going to make you feel like, for a wedding that you look a little bit younger or that you need less makeup. And I don't think when done right, and I think this is where picking your artist is really important, I don't think it looks really obvious. It should look very natural. And I think if it doesn't, as it ages, it's going to look bad. And I think the next wave in us as professionals is removing not great work. And, we certainly want to get it right from the start. And so, offering natural results, good color choices, good shape, and giving them that education of what we think looks best and age appropriate, all of that is, of absolute top concern. So, nobody has to worry that they're going to come out with super thick eyebrows, when they've never had any eyebrows before. I'm not about that. It's going to be obvious, and you're not going to feel good. You're going to feel self-conscious. That's exactly what we're trying to prevent. So, good. Well, if there's not any other questions, I thank you so much for your time. I hope you learned a little bit. Certainly, if you have any other questions, I hear ya. There's a lot to it. There's a lot more nitty gritty about, what actually happens during the service. I try to post lots of pictures. I'll start to be posting a little bit more videos of actually doing the service so that people can kind of see a little bit of those, in the process shots. But again, it's been a pleasure talking to you. My name's Kristen. A lot of years as an esthetician, loving it, lots of years ahead, and follow me on Instagram, #BrowseByKristen.